absolute unit here. I mean, this thing is pretty crazy. What is going on? So today we're gonna do an unboxing video for the turbo kit for my E46 M3. And I just wanted to run down through the stuff that I bought and just to show you guys the the list and then go from there. So to start with, we got the first box of the CXRacing turbo kit for the E46 M3. This turbo kit is built for the E46 M3 specifically. They have almost everything, but not exactly. So I have a few other parts to kind of complement that, but I'll run through that and just show you what comes with the kit and go from there. So starting with box number one, we got, we got the exhaust manifold. So you'll see it's a top mount manifold and then external wastegate. You'll have a couple different options when it comes to exhaust manifolds for turbo kits on the E46 M3. The most popular ones are going to be the bottom mount manifolds, and those are actually going to sit right behind the motor mount for the engine. So you have to modify that. It puts the turbo all the way at the bottom of the car. So if your air filter is right there, you're gonna suck some water in. So that's why I didn't want to do any of that. And honestly, the biggest part, because you can reroute the filter to the top of the car. The biggest part for me is I wanted this to be visible because it's cool and it looks really neat. You're not gonna see this part, but it's mostly gonna be the turbo. And the turbo will sit right next to where the coolant overflow tank goes. And then this wastegate pipe right here is basically gonna sit on the wastegate and then make its way down to the bottom of the car and just dump right there on the passenger side. So really cool looking manifold. The welds are pretty decent. It's not like the cleanest welds ever, but they look to be sealing pretty well for the most part. And this will bolt right up to the factory studs. I have to double check that actually, just to make sure that the studs are long enough. I heard that you can swap them out for, I think it's the E46 studs, but we'll see about that when it comes to installing it. Next up, so we got some bolts for the turbo here. This will go up to the T4. It's a T4 flange. These CXRacing turbo kits will come with the turbo, but I opted not to get the turbo with it because the CXRacing turbos tend to not last very long. They're not super reliable. And so I decided to go with a Pulsar turbo, which is also made in China, but it's a lot more reliable and they last quite a bit and they're really good quality. They're pretty popular if you don't know about them in the budget like turbo scene. So I opted for that. I got a GTX3582R, and then we'll cover that one after this. But next up is gonna be, okay, so we got the oil drain line. So this is a drain hose that is gonna go right down to the oil pan on the passenger side. So go from your turbo all the way down, and then you'll have to tap your oil pan. And so that's what this guy is. They give you, if you don't get the turbo, they don't give you the drain flange for the turbo. So you'll need to buy that separately. And they also don't give you this fitting for the flange side. And so because I only have this one and I wanted things to stay within like the black scheme that I've got going on, I decided to order another one of these in black so that it could match the fitting that I have coming off of the flange for the turbo. And then this is going to be the adapter that goes into the oil pan. So you'll drill a hole, fit this in, and then tighten it down. You'll see some 2 copper washers right here, and then this will connect to this fitting right here and then to this hose. And then for the feed side, they also give you this hose right here, and this will go from the top of the turbo to the oil filter housing. So this kit will come with an oil filter sandwich. Problem with these is these are actually they're made for screw-on type filters. So the way this works, it's super useful for cars with the spin-on filter. But anyway, so the way this works is you got this little guy right here that spins into where the filter usually spins onto the car here. And then this part will poke through here, and then your actual filter will sit here and screw into that part. And then based on what you need, you can use one of these pre-tapped ports for your oil feed for the turbo, or maybe like an oil temperature sensor or oil pressure sensor, whatever you want. But the S54 does not use a spin-on type filter, so that's kind of useless in this application. I reached out to CXRacing and they did acknowledge that it indeed doesn't fit and that you should tap into another place on the block, the oil filter housing. So there's actually a port back there that's not being used, and so you can use that and find an AN fitting that will fit this, or you can tap into that port, re-tap it, or you have the other port is being used by an oil temperature sensor, oil pressure sensor, I don't know. And you can actually buy a little spacer. I'm going to put this on the screen here. Where you screw on the adapter on the end, and then there's a little port that you can tap into and plug this hose in basically, and that will get you your oil feed without any sort of modification to the block itself. So pretty cool. I'm gonna go that route. I'll drop a link for everything below in an Excel spreadsheet. So next, they actually give you this little like air filter for the turbo. I'm not planning to run this very long because I want to just get a turbo guard filter. It looks cleaner, and this is kind of too flashy for me. I don't like the too flashy, and it's red, so it doesn't really match anything I have going on under the hood. But I'll run it for a bit just to see, test the car out, and then I'll get a proper guard. And then you've got the this is the downpipe here. So this would be the turbine housing side, and then they have a little port for O2 sensors here, but it's too close to the turbo if you want to use like a wideband sensor, so I'm not going to use it there. And it goes down to another V-band that connects to this pipe right here, and then this pipe has another O2 sensor port that I'm actually going to cut off and re-weld because I have an Innovate wideband gauge. They actually give you a 1-inch bung that they recommend, and I use like the factory bungs on the E46 M3, and my O2 sensor is already gone. It's already malfunctioning. So I'm gonna weld this 1-incher in, get a new sensor in this spot, which should be far enough. They usually say about 36 inches from the turbo when you're doing I think it's catless, but yeah, so I'll do that. And then this pipe basically goes right back to your factory exhaust. So you can see the dual split here. I'm not going to keep this for very long because I want to do a full 3-inch. This is a 3-inch pipe right here. And then it splits to 2.5. You can see there's a kind of a taper here. And so you'll lose a bit of horsepower here because of this decrease in the volume. So the exhaust gases have to work a little bit more to get out because there's a smaller size pipe for the rest of the exhaust. So what I'm going to do is basically cut off the pipe right here and then run a 3-inch all the way back, and then probably use this very wide pipe here to connect back to the muffler in the back. And then at some point I'm going to do like an exhaust cutout valve, a 3-inch cutout, electric cutout that I can just run for, you know, just a straight pipe basically. And then just to quiet it down, I'll have the rest of the exhaust down through the muffler. So the turbo is definitely going to bring the sound down a bit, but I know these S54s scream when they go high RPM. So yeah. So I mean, pretty cool. Again, like they have decent welds. It's not the worst, but they're pretty good. So should hold up. And then last but not least, the wastegate. This is like a knockoff tile wastegate, the old wastegate, and these are actually pretty crap. So my tuner from HC Performance recommended to just get a proper name brand wastegate, just because these tend to fail, and this is like one of the most important parts of your turbo. So I'm already dropping stuff. So he recommended just not to get it. You can run it. I ran it on my IS300 2JZ GT single turbo, which uses a CXRacing kit as well. And I had some issues with it, and that's why I think I'm just gonna, you know, I mean, that's why I bought the other one. They give you, you know, some flanges, they give you the fire ring, and then just the spring. There's only one spring, and then some fittings. So, you know, it'll work, but I decided not to use that, so that's it. Off to box number 2 now. Okay, box number 2, CXRacing kit. So the kit will come with the exhaust manifold and the intake manifold and the intercooler. They have a kit that doesn't have the intercooler, and I think that doesn't have the intake manifold as well. Here, let's start with the intake manifold here. I did pull it out already. This is packaged really well usually, but I already took these out to look at them. This still retains the ITBs from the S54, and then this is pretty much fully closed off except for this vacuum port. So this will go to your idle control valve, and then you can actually use the idle control valve. One of the ports on there has like a smaller, like 3/8 vacuum hose that you can use for blow-off valve boost reference. And then the manifold actually has a port for the factory MAF sensor, but I'm actually not going to use the factory MAF sensor. HC Performance prefers to use the Ford MAF sensors. They're a lot more popular. So I'll have to figure out something, because this actually doesn't fit that, because I think the Ford MAF screws go like here and there, and it's also not circle, it's a little bit more rectangular. So I'm gonna have to modify this a bit to make that work, and then we'll see how that goes. So, but yeah, so this goes to then a 3-inch pipe down to the intercooler side. This will sit on the very top, so you'll see all this exposed. I'll probably honestly coat this, because I mean, it's not like super pretty to look at, so I'll probably coat it in a black paint of some sort. I know like this, the paint probably won't help with heat retention, but you know, a lot of manifolds out there are coated and they run just fine. So we'll do that. But you can see the welds are pretty good. I looked around, I didn't see any leaks of any sort. The manifold is pretty dirty, so I recommend you clean it before you install it, because there's a bunch of crap in there, in the ports and whatnot. And next, we got the blow-off valve that comes with the kit. This is also a tile, like older style tile replica. Although these work just fine, so I didn't get a name brand one for this, but it should be good enough. And if it does crap out, that's not a big deal. I can just get I'll just buy a proper one. But this is one that I didn't really bother trying to get a name brand for, and plus they're expensive too. So they give you everything. You have a flange here if you wanted to weld it onto a pipe, if you're not using some of the factory pipes. They do have a port for this, so yeah. And then they give you that spring. The wastegate spring, I think, was like 8 psi. No, I don't know what the spring rating is on this one, so I'll have to check and measure vacuum to make sure that the blow-off valve doesn't open under load for this car. I would assume they would give you a proper spring, but you can never be too sure. So I'll measure vacuum, make sure this is the right spring rate. So if not, I can just change the spring out. This uses the same springs as the tile blow-off valves. So, and then they give you fittings and whatnot. So you know, you have everything you need to connect this up. Now we got, here is the intercooler they supply with this kit. Actually, like, you know, it's a pretty cool setup. Most of the turbo kits either put the intercooler below the crash bar, or they put the intercooler through the crash bar and just cut off the portions that would interfere. So I wanted to retain my crash bar, and I liked the tall, you know, larger core. So the crash bar, I think, will go like right here. So it'll cover a bit of it, but at least you have some at the top right here, and all the way at the bottom to go through the bottom vent in the bumper. They give you brackets that bolt onto the car, the frame. So this will bolt right up to the front of the car, and then I don't think you have to do any modifications, but we'll find out. There are actually no instructions for this CXRacing kit out there, so which is why I'm documenting this for everyone out there. The end ports on this look like 2.5 inch. So I'm guessing there's probably gonna be some intercooler pipe that tapers down to a 2.5 from the 3 inch of the intake manifold. So we'll have to see about that. Let's take a look at the rest of the box here. Looks like we have a bunch of intercooler piping here. This looks to be the blow-off valve flange pipe. Yep. So the blow-off valve we'll see here. You'll see that these are the same style as the tile flanges. Even though they give you that blow-off valve, they'll match right up to any like Turbosmart or tile blow-off valve. I'll probably get a Turbosmart one, just because we see a bunch of couplers here. Let's see. Oh, there it is. Yeah. So you do have one. You can see here. It's a 3 inch that tapers down to a 2.5. So at some point, that intake piping goes down to 2.5. It would probably be good if you guys know how to weld aluminum to weld a 3 inch piping on the end tank for the intercooler outlet port. So that way it's the same size all the way up. Here we have some more piping, and then there's that mounting plate for the intake manifold. So they do have, you can see the mounting points there so that it bolts and it sits tight in the engine bay, right where the stock intake manifold goes. And then you have a bunch of couplers there, not couplers, but you have a bunch of fasteners, clamps for this whole thing. Let's move on. Now it's time for the main event. Here is the Pulsar GTX3582R. So I already opened this box. I have a few things in here that I'm going to showcase as well. But we got the T4 gasket as well as a turbo blanket that I ordered with the turbo as well. But let's take a look at this absolute unit here. I mean, this thing is pretty crazy. So you'll notice here you have some grooves here, and if you guys don't know, this is the T51R mod that follows from one of the old like HKS turbos that had a specific compressor housing modification that was done, and it wasn't done necessarily for noise, but it was just how they were built back then, from what I understand. Basically what it does is when you're spooling up, it makes the turbo whistle a lot louder, and so it's purely just for noise. There's no like performance improvement to it at all. I just wanted to have a little bit more fun and create more noise, because that was the whole point of this, is just to have fun, and why not add more noise to the induction. So this is again a GTX 3582R with a 82 AR turbine housing, and it's a V-band to a 3-inch, and this is a dual ball bearing, so it's water cooled and oil cooled. The water cooling is optional, but if you want to preserve the life of the turbo, I would recommend it. So I'm going to be going through that, and where I'm going to be tapping in for my water inlet and outlet on the engine. Yeah, so I mean, it is pretty big. I have big hands, and you can see this is absolute beast of a unit. I did notice when I unpacked the turbo that it doesn't have a boost reference port, so I'll have to drill a hole here just to get a fitting that I ordered. I'll show here in a bit. So in the box, they basically give you the turbine housing, the compressor housing, which I've kind of put together like loosely, and then they'll give you the oil drain flange gasket and a oil inlet restrictor. So actually has like a smaller port here on the front here. So basically this restricts the flow of the oil that would be coming from the engine to make sure that it's not overflowing the turbo. And then I ordered, they have these water fittings, so they don't come with the turbo by default, so I added those to the order, and these will just match up their, I think they're AN6 fittings. And so I don't have the fittings here, they're still on the way, but these are gonna go to a couple spots on the car. One to the thermostat housing, and one down to the radiator inlet hose, and that way you're pulling in water or cold water, and you're releasing hot water so that it can be cooled immediately into the radiator. And then this is the little like boost reference hose fitting that I'll be tapping into the compressor housing on the turbo and then installing so that I can get a vacuum line to the wastegate, which is here. And then I just got a drill bit and tap bit for a 1/8 NPT, which is going to be what this is using, and what some other bits are going to be using as well. So the wastegate I got is a Turbosmart HyperGate 45. So these are the fittings that come with the wastegate. They're all, I think they're about the same size too. They give you a bit of stickers here. But here we go. And then here's your adjustment tool. I got the 7 psi black, which means that the 7 psi spring is already pre-installed, but they do give you other springs. So if you wanted to add to your spring rate, or change your springs up, you could, and then you have the tool to open that up. But mine was pre-installed with 7 psi. I'm doing 7 psi because I didn't build the pistons. They're still stock compression, so it's 11.5 to 1, which is pretty high. So typically if you're running 91, my tuner was saying you probably don't want to see more than like 14 psi, and that's with meth. So with methanol, which is what I plan on doing eventually as well, so I just decided to go with the 7 psi spring so that it's low enough to where you can still run wastegate pressure, but high enough to where it's still a little fun. But yeah, so they give you the flanges as well, and then the fire ring. But yeah, so it's, pull this out here. It's actually like a decently sized unit. It's not like too tall. I think this is actually shorter than the tile one, so it'll kind of save some room there since this sits at the very front of the engine. And I did measure, so Turbosmart, since they use the same, here, let's put the fire ring on there, make sure. They use the same flange as tile, so this will fit right into here. Boom, and then you get your clamp, tighten that down, and then this will have this pipe right here. This dump tube will connect to this and go all the way down to the floor. So I'm excited for that. Should look pretty neat. I have a new valve cover gasket, some valve shims from Isco, and some new grommets. So this is actually a kit that FCPEuro sells. They have the valve shim tool. This is like a little magnet that can go and grab the valve shims without dropping them into your block, which is super important when you don't have the block pulled apart. You don't want to break your engine. And then they give you all new like spark plug seals as well. So I'm gonna go through and replace the gasket while I do the valve adjustment, because I think it's due for one. And then so we'll tackle that as well. I also got a Schwaben coolant system evacuation tool. Basically what this is when you fill your coolant system after it's been bled or drained, this uses compressed air to make sure that your system is sucking in coolant without any air included, so that way you don't have to worry about bleeding the system or doing anything like that to make sure there's no air, because that's going to take care of it for you. So I just got that because it was kind of a no-brainer. It's not too expensive, and I could use that for some other cars as well. So that's that. We got some Radium engineering goodies here. The biggest thing is the fuel rail. So I actually got this whole kit from a company called Clean Injection. They build this kit for the E46 M3 specifically. They use some Radium engineering pieces. The injectors and the fuel pump are made by Clean Injection, or packaged by them anyway. Beautiful, beautiful fuel rail here. So this will replace the factory fuel rail in the factory location. There's no like fabrication needed. It bolts right up to where the fuel rail goes. The reason why I did this is because so I got 1000 cc injectors. I think it's these ones. So these are 1000 cc Bosch injectors. They're EV14, I believe, and so they're kind of plug and play. They fit right in. Clean Injection gives you the clips to plug right into the factory harness, so that's pretty neat. And then these are a bit taller than the factory injectors, so they kind of fall deep into the intake manifold, a little too deep. So typically you would use spacers to space them out, but I figured eventually I kind of want to do a flex fuel system, and this was one of the things that you would have to replace anyway. Make sure your fuel lines are all braided and not the factory rubber crap. So I figured why not install it now, and then this will make it easier to install like a fuel pressure regulator if you want to eventually. And then Radium also has some really cool kits to make sure that this fuel rail will connect right up to the factory fuel system. So this hose kit will go and match up right up to where the factory fuel filter goes and fuel pressure regulator. So you don't need an aftermarket one if you're running this. But yeah, and then I got some NGK Iridium 2-step Colder spark plugs. The factory S54 spark plugs are actually pretty good for turbo applications, from what I hear, but the tuner recommended these, so I just got that. And then they have to be gapped at a certain number, which I'll include when we go do that. And then next up is the fuel pump assembly. So this is actually using a Radium Engineering fuel pump kit, because to run some of these aftermarket fuel pumps you need like an adapter bracket, which Radium sells. So they supply the bracket, and then Clean Injection actually supplied the fuel pump, and it's a 450 lph fuel pump that is capable of running E85, so that's perfect for my end goal of running flex fuel. But yeah, in this kit they just have the adapter and it fits in the factory location. I'm not doing a search tank yet for this application, just because I don't plan on tracking the car all the time. It's going to be a street car most of the time, so I figured if I'm just doing like straight line pulls, I'm probably not going to run into any issues. But if you run your car at the track, I would definitely recommend a search tank so that you don't run out of fuel, which I'll probably do eventually for sure. Next up is, this is actually it's part of the adapter for the fuel pump. So this is the sleeve that goes over the fuel pump, and then some hoses and clamps to tighten everything together. They give you instructions for all this as well. But that's about it for the fuel system goodies. Have the Ford MAF sensor. I'll include the part number for this, but it's like one of the more common Ford MAFs that are heavily used in the tuning applications. So this is what I was talking about earlier, where the screws are diagonal, whereas the factory BMW MAF is, straight up vertical. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of modifications to make sure that it fits, and also that it can seal properly, because it's not just about putting this here. We have to seal everything, so maybe I'll like modify this piece so that it can fit and then seal at the top here. We'll see. But this MAF actually came with the pigtail as well, because obviously you'll need to modify the factory harness, and I believe you only use 4 cables out of this, so we'll go through which ones those are and basically solder them into the factory harness, and then that'll be it. So pretty simple there. Lastly, we have a CSF aftermarket radiator. It's a triple pass. It's made specifically for the E46 M3, and this will plug right into the factory location where the factory radiator goes. I don't think there's any modifications that need to be done. It's pretty much the same size. Here it is. They put the CSF logo here, but this is all going to be hidden because I do want to retain AC. So I'll have the AC radiator here in front of it, but this connects right up to factory location, and you'll see the end connections are all made for the BMW hose as well. So basically plug and play. That concludes our unboxing video. Thanks so much for watching. Please like, comment, and subscribe. I hope that you guys follow along to watch the installation process of this. CXRacing does not give you instructions for any of this kit, so it's important to kind of go through this process and document it so that some of you out there can just, you know, learn how to do it yourselves as well. But yeah, I will catch you guys later. See ya.